Jean Valjean heaved a deep sigh. From that moment forth, he noticed that Cosette, who had always heretofore asked to remain at home, saying, "Father, I enjoy myself more here with you," now was always asking to go out. In fact, what is the use of having a handsome face and a delicious costume if one does not display them? He also noticed that Cosette had no longer the same taste for the back garden. Now she preferred the garden, and did not dislike to promenade back and forth in front of the railed fence. Jean Valjean, who was shy, never set foot in the garden. He kept to his backyard, like a dog. Cosette, in gaining the knowledge that she was beautiful, lost the grace of ignoring it. An exquisite grace, for beauty enhanced by ingenuousness, is ineffable, and nothing is so adorable as a dazzling and innocent creature who walks along, holding in her hand the key to paradise, without being conscious of it. But what she had lost in an ingenuous grace, she gained in pensive and serious charm. Her whole person, permeated with the joy of youth, of innocence, and of beauty, breathed forth a splendid melancholy. It was at this epoch that Marius, after the lapse of 6 months, saw her once more at the Luxembourg. Chapter 6. The battle begun. Cosette in her shadow, like Marius in his, was all ready to take fire. Destiny, with its mysterious and fatal patience, slowly drew together these two beings, all charged and all languishing with the stormy electricity of passion, these two souls which were laden with love, as two clouds are laden with lightning, and which were bound to overflow and mingle in a look like the clouds in a flash of fire. The glance had been so much abused in love romances that it has finally fallen into disrepute. One hardly dares to say nowadays that two beings fell in love because they looked at each other. That is the way people do fall in love, nevertheless, and the only way. The rest is nothing, but the rest comes afterwards. Nothing is more real than these great shocks which two souls convey to each other by the exchange of that spark. At that particular hour, when Cosette unconsciously darted that glance which troubled Marius, Marius had no suspicion that he had also launched a look which disturbed Cosette. He caused her the same good and the same evil. She had been in the habit of seeing him for a long time, and she had scrutinized him as girls scrutinize and see, while looking elsewhere. Marius still considered Cosette ugly, when she had already begun to think Marius handsome. But as he paid no attention to her, the young man was nothing to her. Still, she could not refrain from saying to herself that he had beautiful hair, beautiful eyes, handsome teeth, a charming tone of voice when she heard him conversing with his comrades, that he held himself badly when he walked, if you like, but with a grace that was all his own, that he did not appear to be at all stupid, that his whole person was noble, gentle, simple, proud, and that, in short, though he seemed to be poor, yet his air was fine. On the day when their eyes met at last, and said to each other those first obscure and ineffable things which the glance lisps, Cosette did not immediately understand. She returned thoughtfully to the house in the Rue de l'Ouest, where Jean Valjean, according to his custom, had come to spend 6 weeks. The next morning, on waking, she thought of that strange young man, so long indifferent and icy, who now seemed to pay attention to her, and it did not appear to her that his attention was the least in the world agreeable to her. She was, on the contrary, somewhat incensed at this handsome and disdainful individual. A substratum of war stirred within her. It struck her, and the idea caused her a wholly childish joy that she was going to take her revenge at last. Knowing that she was beautiful, she was thoroughly conscious, though in an indistinct fashion, that she possessed a weapon. Women play with their beauty as children do with a knife. They wound themselves. The reader will recall Marius's hesitations, his palpitations, his terrors. He remained on his bench and did not approach. This vexed Cosette. One day she said to Jean Valjean, "Father, let us stroll about a little in that direction." Seeing that Marius did not come to her, she went to him. In such cases, all women resemble Mahomet. And then, strange to say, the first symptom of true love in a young man is timidity. In a young girl, it is boldness. This is surprising, and yet nothing is more simple. It is the two sexes tending to approach each other and assuming each the other's qualities. That day, Cosette's glance drove Marius beside himself, and Marius's glance set Cosette to trembling. Marius went away confident, and Cosette uneasy. From that day forth, they adored each other. The first thing that Cosette felt was a confused and profound melancholy. It seemed to her that her soul had become black since the day before. She no longer recognized it. The whiteness of soul in young girls, which is composed of coldness and gaiety, resembles snow. It melts in love, which is its sun. Cosette did not know what love was. She had never heard the word uttered in its terrestrial sense. On the books of profane music which entered the convent, amour, love, was replaced by timbre, drum, or pandore. This created enigmas which exercised the imaginations of the big girls, such as, "Ah, how delightful is the drum!" or, "Pity it is not a pandore." But Cosette had left the convent too early to have occupied herself much with the drum. Therefore, she did not know what name to give to what she now felt. Is anyone the less ill because one does not know the name of one's malady? She loved with all the more passion because she loved ignorantly. She did not know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, useful or dangerous, eternal or temporary, allowable or prohibited. She loved. She would have been greatly astonished had anyone said to her, "You do not sleep? But that is forbidden. You do not eat? Why, that is very bad. You have oppressions and palpitations of the heart? That must not be. You blush and turn pale when a certain being clad in black appears at the end of a certain green walk? But that is abominable." She would not have understood, and she would have replied, "What fault is there of mine in a matter in which I have no power and of which I know nothing?" It turned out that the love which presented itself was exactly suited to the state of her soul. It was a sort of admiration at a distance, a mute contemplation, the deification of a stranger. It was the apparition of youth to youth, the dream of nights become a reality, yet remaining a dream, the longed-for phantom realized and made flesh at last, but having as yet neither name, nor fault, nor spot, nor exigence, nor defect. In a word, the distant lover who lingered in the ideal, a chimera but with a form. Any nearer and more palpable meeting would have alarmed Cosette at this first stage, when she was still half immersed in the exaggerated mists of the cloister. She had all the fears of children and all the fears of nuns combined. The spirit of the convent, with which she had been permeated for the space of 5 years, was still in the process of slow evaporation from her person, and made everything tremble around her. In this situation he was not a lover. He was not even an admirer. He was a vision. She set herself to adoring Marius as something charming, luminous, and impossible. As extreme innocence borders on extreme coquetry, she smiled at him with all frankness. Every day she looked forward to the hour for their walk with impatience. She found Marius there, she felt herself unspeakably happy, and thought in all sincerity that she was expressing her whole thought when she said to Jean Valjean, "What a delicious garden the Luxembourg is." Marius and Cosette were in the dark as to one another. They did not address each other. They did not salute each other. They did not know each other. They saw each other, and, like the stars of heaven, which are separated by millions of leagues, they lived by gazing at each other. It was thus that Cosette gradually became a woman and developed, beautiful and loving, with a consciousness of her beauty and in ignorance of her love. She was a coquette to boot through her ignorance. End of Book 3, Chapters 5 and 6. Recording by Dave Dwight, Southern Illinois.